This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
First of all, it's amazing to sit in a new studio, to sit in a studio with you, because you were one of the people I did the live recording with at the other studio.
Yes.
Which I thought was 1 year ago. But no, you and Gabi told me it's 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago in a different studio. This is gorgeous, this.
It's gorgeous.
It is.
Yes. Pierre gets to sit here and Michael gets to sit here. Now I get to sit here. Cheers.
Cheers.
Let's not say what we have in those cups. Luke.
Yes.
You are the CEO, co-founder of MadeYou. Still,
yes. Things are all right, yes.
And I've been bugging you and I'm wanting to hear about your calibration processes.
Yes.
What is it? What is it that you do? What outcomes does it have? But first, you told me you already had one of those meetings with a client this morning. How do you feel about talking even more about it? The word calibration doesn't really, it doesn't have, a party sound to it.
It's not a sexy word, is it?
Yeah. So does it ever become boring? Are you ready to talk about calibration with me today?
The word itself might be unsexy, but I really love talking about calibration. It's one of the favorite parts of the MadeYou services that I really get stuck into. I really love it. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about it today.
Why is it one of your favorites?
Because I think it touches on something like performance management, performance rating, something that's quite dear to my heart when I was employed and also now as part of MadeYou. And I think the fundamental of calibration is to try and make the performance management process as objective as possible. And I love the fact that I get to interact with people and get to challenge them, and really knowing that the outcomes are coming out with objective performance reviews. So that's why I really like it, because I think the output is the main goal, and it's very tangible. So yeah, I like that.
If you said that in the end of this discussion, everyone would go like, I get what he means.
Yes.
Even I.
Yes.
But I think that we need to rewind a bit, since when we first spoke about it, I had no clue. Maybe other smarter people in the world already knows exactly what you're going to say. But calibration, what is it? What's the process of your calibration concept at MadeYou?
So this stems from something that when I was employed, we used to do when I was employed, and we brought it into MadeYou as well as a offering service to some of our clients. Typically at the end of year, employees, managers, basically the whole business goes through an annual performance review, ranking system, performance management system, rating the performance for the year, and then also coming up with ideas about what the individuals need to work on next year's. One of the fundamental problems that comes out of not having calibration is that there is a differential between how one manager might rate somebody and how another manager might rate somebody based on what would typically be the same performance level, but the interpretations, the subjectivity of those managers. So what calibration is about bringing that group of managers together to discuss their direct reports together, so that we're actually having a very open conversation about how we're ranking these people and how our colleagues would also rank the direct reports, so that we get this, from this conversation, we're getting a real kind of full view of the performance of the individuals. And also because we're profiling all the direct reports of these peer group managers, you're also getting to see where people fit in regards to similar performance levels. So if one person's getting rated as a top performer, for instance, and another person has a similar performance level to that, then it obviously would align from a calibration point of view that they should be sitting in the same performance ranking, rather than those kind of conversations that come from subjectivities. And we know that some managers overrank, and we know that some managers underrank, and some managers get it bang on. But the good thing about calibration is that conversation happens in the room, and then the rankings that are coming out of those discussions are a business ranking rather than a manager ranking.
Maybe you saw in my face, I was like, I can't forget this, I'm going to ask this, I'm going to ask this. And so many thoughts coming up. You were saying end of year, annual performance management, ranking. All of a sudden I felt like ranking could have a negative tone to it.
Completely.
Because you rank people.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's not really you rank people. You rank people or skills, performances within the organizations. But also, you were saying something, or something that hit me was, when we do the performance reviews, me as a manager, I think that this person is my A star. This is the best person to do this job.
Yep.
Because I know him or I know her doing this job from whatever I see or from whatever they report back to me.
Yep.
Whereas I don't really get the peer discussions.
Completely.
So, and I'm often on the managerial side of things, but when it comes to performance management as HR, it's very difficult to know who and how they are ranking in a certain way. So what you're saying, you bring a group of managers into the room to discuss this one person of my team, then the next one, and then the next one, and then we do the same with you and your teams.
Yep.
How long time does this take?
So if it was done in that process, it would probably take a long time. Mm-hmm. What I tend to do with MadeYou is the services we provide, we collect a lot of information up front. Mm-hmm. So the information we have before we go into the room is we know how the manager would have ranked the individual. We know how all the peer managers would have ranked the specific individuals. Mm-hmm. We also know if they've done 360, we would have assigned whatever's come out of 360 in regards to that. And also if they're doing self-assessment, so the individual's done a self-assessment, we would also take that into consideration. So when we walk into the room, we already know where there is some consistency in regards to people's thoughts on these individuals and where there is some inconsistencies in regards to those thoughts on the individuals. And I think the conversations where we're having longer conversations will tend to be around the inconsistencies. Where they tend to be shorter is where everyone is fairly consistent. They've all got a similar viewpoint of these specific individuals. So the time allocation is really working on that. Typically, I would say we have a client that we're discussing 36 individuals and it takes a full day to do that. Yeah. With a group of 8 managers in the room talking about 36 individuals. So that kind of gives it a sense. But sometimes we're talking about 20 individuals with 4 people in the room and it takes less. I think for me, the longer it takes is the more managers that are discussing rather than the individuals. You could have quite a lot of individuals, but if you've got a small set of managers, there's less of those opinions coming out. The day goes a lot faster.
And what's your role? They are discussing, let's say 8 managers are discussing person A. Mm-hmm. And they keep discussing, remember that project and you remember what they said and what they did. Yeah, but how do you steer this?
So my role in the actual meeting, the calibration meeting, because obviously we've collated all that information beforehand, so MadeYou is very instrumental in that. My role in the actual meeting room is to facilitate the day. So mainly my focus point is getting people to have open conversations, to coming to people who have clearly shared an opinion with me before we got in the room, but are being quiet in the room, is to draw those people into that conversation, and also to be aware of what's being said, because typically if we're saying one trait was amazing in somebody else and then we're actually talking about a different person with a similar trait but we're not giving it the same weighting, then I'm the person that's in the room going, hang on a second, this person we give higher ratings because of that particular trait, and yet what's happening with this particular trait with this individual. So it's really being aware of what's being said and guiding the conversation and moving the conversation on as well. Sometimes it can get quite heated. So my role is to make sure that we're coming back to the business logic of things and bringing it back to the objective. What's the business performance? What were the attitudes and behaviors like that the individual was demonstrating against the values, or just in general, and also what potential they have. So bringing it around that.
So it can get quite heated. I can really understand that. That's here and now, and it's supposed, to be discussions. Everyone all the managers kind of go in thinking there will be disagreements. What about afterwards? Are they, best mates? Or how could that potentially damage the business and the relationships between the managers as well?
I think it's not something I've actually seen come out of calibration. I think it's more about alignment, because any heatedness that happens in the room is because people are being quite protective of their individuals. My role is to get them to focus on what's being said, not how they're feeling about what's being said, but what's being said, because it's valuable feedback, and taking a note of that feedback to pass to the individual. So it's all about being open to receiving the information. I think the tenseness, if it ever does get tense, because not all of them are tense, but if there is any of those tense moments, it's working through it, listening to the feedback and moving on. I actually find that managers are much better when they leave the room, because they're actually leaving the room with a full set of feedback that they can give the specific individual. So rather than me just presenting my side of what I think, I'm actually presenting a business information, as this is what the business thinks, because it's actually completely aligned with everyone in the room. So there's a lot more empowerment for the managers leaving the room. So I think sometimes it can, it's about just making them more aware of focusing on the conversation. And one of the things that I clearly do in the facilitation of it as well is when we're having these conversations about every individual is almost about what happens next. So it's almost like, what are you going to tell the individual that they're working amazingly well on and the business values, but also what direction are you going to give them so that they've got improvement steps for the following year? Because we want this to be, it's not a critique situation. This is about an empowerment situation, coming out of the room with empowering information to give to the individual that empowers them to do something with that information, which is concrete and also easy to move across. So if I'm moving from one business manager to another business manager, that feedback is the same. It's tangible. It's something that I can work on no matter which team I'm in, which department I'm in, which department head I'm under. That feedback's always going to be constant. So it's something that really empowers me to keep moving forward.
As a coach,
yes,
I'm thinking confidentiality. Like, am I a negative prone person? I'm not, but there's risks in everything that we do.
Yep.
Here, the potential, if everyone were super professional, didn't take this as personal, just saw the benefit and the business sort of idea of things, then,
Yep.
Whereas these are humans. And I'm thinking managers not staying confidential.
Yep.
Not openly sharing retaliations, perhaps. I don't know. But then also, how can this... And also, in terms of confidentiality, employees afterwards, they know that they're being discussed. Like, they're in there now. I can see them through the
through the window. Yes.
They're talking about me. They're looking at me.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
It could be odd, no?
Completely. And I think there's some fundamentals with making calibration work. The idea of calibration is that we are calibrating the performance review of the individuals. Not only are we doing that, but we're also calibrating as managers how we view performance within the business. So there's a secondary gain, which is if I know I'm an overmarker, so I've been through calibration a few times and I'm always overmarking, I need to start thinking that actually compared with my peer groups, I'm an overmarker, and the same with an undermarker. So here the calibration works from those points of views. It's empowering if it's coming out with a business with a business focus. So it's almost like the business feedback that we're giving back to the individual is aligned. It's not the manager feedback, it's the business feedback.
It's backed up.
Completely. And that can only work if it's presented as business feedback rather than this manager said this manager said this manager said that. Because if you start doing that, then the individual's going to own on to that, which is, I have a problem with that manager, I have a problem with that manager. And you don't want the feedback that this is about empowering the individual on making things better for the business rather than this specific manager and this specific manager. In regards to the individuals being taught about, I think the clients I've worked with make it fully transparent. So the individuals know this is the process. They know the benefits.
They will know.
Completely. They know the process. It's very transparent, but they also know the value of this, which is this is an objective feedback. The business managers are getting together and aligning. So that also comes across. Also, with the clients I work on, we always take the self-assessments into process. So here, the individual is representing themselves in that room through their self-assessment. So the more effort that they put into writing their self-assessment, the more empowered they are to be present in that room. Also, if we're bringing in 360s, which I think is hugely valuable in this process as well, is not only am I representing myself in that room, but also my colleagues, my peer groups, my own peer groups, and my direct reports are also representing themselves in that room as well. So it's actually can be viewed very positively, but you are right that if it's he said, she said, then the whole process breaks down. It has to be presented as one unit feedback, one unit performance, end of year performance.
And this, I guess, you manage via the preparations in the beginning, because this might be a new group of managers not really having worked together, going in, totally trusting the other ones with your thoughts on the other ones, which ultimately reflects on them, could be as managers. So it's not only about the individuals, it's actually discussing your managerial skills. Like we can see that we have a common pattern here in your employees.
Yes.
What does this, do the conversation often sort of go into, look, we see this in your team, maybe it's you?
I think we have had some examples where there is some consistency within specific managers about certain topic areas. None of them have been contentious. I think one of the key examples is self-assessment forms within a specific unit, where it's very clear that they aren't putting as much effort into their self-assessment, and it's very clear it's coming from one area. And when you go all the way up the tree, it's consistent. So it's almost feeding back in the room is, this is what we're bringing from self-assessment, but from an observer's point of view and an evaluator's point of view, this is consistent with all of your team, and they're taking away that as actions to do next time. So I think it is about being a little bit more vulnerable, but the good thing in this is it's give and take. Is ultimately, if I know that you are an overmarker, this is my opportunity to share some information with you about the reality of the situation, about some of your direct reports. If I know somebody else is an undermarker, it also helps me to build them up. But on the same token, I have to be open to receiving the same feedback as giving it. So the empowerment comes of sharing that open feedback. And we do it in such a way that it's set up, as you said, all that sort of work we do pre-getting in the room is so fundamental, because you can already see as a facilitator where the key conversation points are going to be because of the huge differentials, and that's almost drawing it out. And then when the conversation happens, you already see where the misalignment is, because what they're saying on paper isn't representing how they're just justifying it in person. They're not coming up with enough information that justifies what they've said. And I think this also goes back from an HR point of view, is why there's so differentials of why somebody's getting a high rating, but you might not understand from an HR point of view, but you're like, oh, but the manager knows them better I do. Actually, in the room when we're having these conversations, it's evident that they can't back it up. So it's almost like, well, why have you given this person this rating? Why are we saying this conversation? What exactly do they need? And when we're talking about training needs, it's evident. If they're in a management position and we're saying they need loads and loads of training on people management, their team on performing because they're not getting one-on-ones, etc., then it's almost like, well, we can't give them a really high rating if their job is a people manager and they're not managing their people. These conversations come to fruition.
There will be managers that can't really speak up for their team members. And some people that come on really strong about their team members.
Yep.
How do you, as a facilitator, are they going to be low ranked because they have a manager that is, I wouldn't say weak, but not, able to present or showcase them, or maybe not know them that much yet?
Yeah.
How This sounds difficult.
It is difficult, and I mean, by the very nature of human nature, we know that when we get a group of people together in a room, there's going to be some people who are much more assertive, much more dominant, and tend to steal the mic and want to talk, and therefore might get their way a lot of the times. And the people who are quieter might not get a voice. This is where the prep comes in, because I think all that work that I do before we get into the room is I know exactly how everyone's rated everyone. How the 360s come out, how the peer group, the self-assessment is, and that's where I'm prompting conversations. So typically is I'm going to be bringing people into the conversation. Naturally, if it's one of your direct reports, I'm going to come to you, whether you're one of the dominant characters or when you're one of the less dominant characters, I'm still going to come to you for your opinion because it's your direct report. But also, if you've had an opinion about somebody else's direct report, and I can very clearly see it, I'm also going to draw you in the room. As a facilitator as well, I'll know who's doing more of the talking and less of the talk, and so there's going to be certain points where I'm going to be asking specific people, what do they think on these particular people? So gathering that feedback and saying, right, well, what do you think on this? What do you think they should be working on? So
in essence, you already have the key in the preparation.
Completely.
Sorry. And who are you in all this? You know, they're sitting here, they're talking, and you go, I don't agree with that. You know, this must happen. You're also a person and a human. Yeah. How do you manage your own
what's going on
thoughts?
In my head? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is very interesting because I almost think it's if I didn't have a business background and I hadn't been a manager or a leader in the past, it probably might be easier because I wouldn't be getting the internal dialogue in my head. Yeah. But I think one of the things my clients really appreciate is the fact that that dialogue is in my head and I don't ignore it. So I would then voice to the room is, as an external person, this is the way I'm seeing it. How, you know, can you give me more information? Can you establish this? It almost feels like this should be happening, or this person isn't as good or is better than what you're saying they are based on what you've said. Can you elaborate? So I kind of get more out of them by just voicing what's out in my head. It also gets it out of my head, but it also means that I'm prompting the other person to give more evidential proof or give more conversation around what they're talking about so that I can understand. And also, I don't understand the specifics of each business. So it's almost like if it's not making sense to me, because obviously I'm external, then I'm asking them I'm questioning them a lot more and they're having to give much more evidential proof. And as in doing that, they're either agreeing with what they're saying, what they've written down on paper, or they're disagreeing with what they've written down on paper based on how they're actually coming across with that information. So yes, there's times when I don't agree with what's being said either way. I mean, I think I just voice my concerns and get them to talk a little bit more. My job isn't to rate these people. My job is just to get the people in the room to be happy with what it looks like when we walk out the room. Everyone is happy with how it looks. And that's my job in the room. And until that happens, and that's kind of my role is to facilitate that. But I play devil's advocate a lot, but it's not coming from an emotional state. Whereas I think without a facilitator, everyone's got their own passion. They're trying to defend their own unit, their own people. So there's always going to be an emotional bias there, whether it's with an external person. I can play devil's advocate because in essence, I just want everyone to be happy with the ratings at the end of the day. I don't really mind where people go as long as they're falling into the right place based on the conversations.
Right. So you're the objective person. And if you don't understand, chances are high that they don't, because they might be talking about what they believe is the same thing, but from their own different perspectives and angles.
Yeah.
You were saying, once we're done and we leave the room, then this needs to have happened. How do you know when you're done? When do you know that we're done, finished with this person, and the rest of the day?
So I do something quite fun, which is we get very visual with MadeYou in Calibration. So everyone's we get their pictures cut out. We're talking about individuals, so let's not just have their names, let's have what they look like. So,
the employees' actual pictures. So you could have me on the wall.
On the wall, exactly, yeah. Thumbs up.
Underperformer.
But it allows us to move people around a lot of the time. So I think that's a good thing for me. What typically happens is when we're talking about a specific individual, so if we're talking about Heidi, for instance, we get specific around that conversation and it will naturally feel that everyone is quite happy with where Heidi is. So then we move on to the other person. There might be sometimes, if we're talking about Luke, for instance, there might be some contentions. We can't quite decide. There's a lot of conversation in the room and it could land one of two ways. So what I do is I leave those people to the end. So we've had the conversation. We know whereabouts they are in the middle. I leave them in the middle for a discussion point at the end. As you go through the calibration process and you're getting more and more people calibrated, where we're happy with them, it allows you to revisit those ones that are more difficult, because then you can align them where do they sit better
accordingly.
Exactly, with whoever's already been calibrated. So it's almost like if I calibrate more with this person, so I'm in between these two groups, but actually when we look at who's in each group, I work, I calibrate more with this group than that group, then there's a natural tendency to move them. So it's almost becoming easier at the end of the day, because then the more people that are there, the more guidance you've got on what each group looks like, what the characteristics were, what the conversations were, and then you can realign. Ultimately, my aim at the end of the session, because it might not be a full day, but the end of the session is that we're looking at what we've done with the images on the wall or on the screen if we're doing it over Zoom, the images that we're looking at and where they're actually sitting, and that we're happy. For me, is if there's any indication that there's still a conversation point, we open up that conversation again. We have that conversation fully, we align to the point where we're very happy, and then we're basically looking at this screen or the wall and saying, right, we are happy, we are calibrated. When that gets done, that's the end of that part of the process.
Kind of to toot your horn and like sales pitch you, it sounds like this needs to be very like a coordinated process. It needs to be taken care of. I'm thinking, if you go to the doctor, you go early in the morning when they're, fresh. You don't want to go get a wrong diagnosis by the end of the day. Intricate question here, maybe very detailed, but I got curious. If we were hang out all day, large group of managers, we talk a lot, and the longer the day goes, we're getting tired and just want to get rid of things. Do you plan like, okay, there seem to be a lot of deviations around these people. Let's discuss them first. Or are you going by your example of planning things out before, and then we talk about the deviators later on?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of planning and a lot of structure, which I'm smiling at, because in other parts of my work, I wouldn't exactly say I am more planned and more structured. But this is very, very to the letter. I'm fully prepared. If we've got a large group of managers and a large group of people, which we talked about before as one example, I already plan out the days so that each manager is going to talk about somebody, and then we move on to another person. So we're not doing one manager's group, then another manager's group, and then by the end of the day, nobody cares what Luke's team's doing, because we're just going to get. So we mix them all up. So we're always talking about, one from you, one from you, one from you, so that we've always got that investment, because you're always going to be more invested about your own people. So if you're still going to pay attention for the rest of the day, you're going to do that. The deviations, I tend to keep them as few as possible. So it's almost like when I feel like for me, it could land either way, that for me is a deviation. If it's clear that they think it's a deviation, but for me, I still feel that actually this isn't a deviation in my head, it's just we're not committing to it, then I will keep poking until we actually get the calibration. So for me, the deviations are normally few, and they're a lot easier at the end of the day, because you're almost just going that. But yes, it can get quite tiring. Regular breaks, if it's a full day, they obviously have to have a good healthy lunch, but having the breaks and reading the room, Heidi. I mean, if I can see people are struggling, it's time for a break. Even if I didn't actually have one scheduled, or we already just had one, I've lost the room, I need to get the room back. So it's almost about getting that excitement back up. And even little things like moving people around. So you were sat there for a couple of hours, go and sit over there and swap your seats around, just to get that energy in the room. And sometimes even if we're doing it face to face and we've got the pictures on the wall, let's just stand up and get closer to the wall. Let's have a look around at what we're looking at, just to get some energy in the room. But yes, it can get tiring if it's a full day one at the end of the day, but nobody ever goes, just put them where they want.
No,
because it's like you can't do that because of the whole process. So
exactly, because this is opposite to coaching. This is not about the person or the group. This is about others. In reality.
Completely.
All right, so you're done, you're dusted, you have your pictures on the wall, everyone is friends, you leave the room, and then HR. What do you tell HR? Do you report anything back?
So there's a few steps that happen afterwards, and they're very important steps. So for me, the first step is obviously HR are in the room. They can see what's happening. They don't get.
They are in the room.
They don't. Yeah, they're in the room. They aren't facilitating. They aren't having conversations. They're just completely observing, just so they can see what's happening along the way and understand what's the conversations are. My main aim in the room is to get each manager to understand what the feedback is for each one of their individuals. So I'm less concerned as a facilitator in regards to where we're actually placing people. I'm more interested in, is the manager capturing the feedback on what these individuals need to do to improve or to be even better than what they are, or even to go on to the next step within their career, because these are the conversations we're having. That's part of the calibration. These conversations come up. It's part of the process, but the manager needs to be capturing that information, because that's where the true empowerment is for the individual. So my role in the room is the manager capturing that information? So afterwards, what the manager will do, so separate to MadeYou, what the manager does then is when they're having the end of year performance review with the individual, they're presenting that business feedback, what's been great, where have they stood out, where have they really achieved, where have they really delivered, what do they need to work on in this year, this coming year, in order to be even better than what they were last year. So that's kind of the feedback they're doing, but they're presenting it from a business point of view rather than a manager point of view. So my feedback would be in there, but it's mixed in with everyone else's feedback, and it's presented as this is what the business is saying. From a MadeYou standpoint, what I'm then doing is I'm presenting information back to HR, which is basically saying what the final calibrations were, as opposed to where the individual managers were ranking, where the peer group was ranking as well. So I can already kind of see who's an over marker, who's an under marker, where the conversations were lying. So I can give that feedback to HR as well. So I'm kind of giving that kind of overview report of not about the individuals, more about the managers in the process, and also who was coming up with constructive stuff. So who was really good in the process of coming up with constructive information and sharing their point of view very, very clearly, and who was less constructive. And all the little things that we've already mentioned. If self-assessments are not getting done in one department, that needs to go back to HR as well. As within Luke's department, not many people are putting that effort into self-assessment. This needs to be paid attention to. And also highlighting any of those training needs that we talked about very specifically. So if we're having a conversation about one person specifically, and we're saying actually this person, if they got coaching, they would really excel in their role and possibly step up in the career path, then I just need to capture that information and feed it back to HR as like, the manager's already got it, but just in case they don't, this conversation happened around this individual and what's happening in that. And also with the superstars, we've got some superstars that come out in these conversations. So what's happening with succession planning? These are our superstars. HR need to be aware. These were the people ranked as superstars. It's not actually called that, but let's just call it that. Superstars, make sure that HR connect with the line managers to make sure that we're doing something with those superstars, because ultimately they're talent, potential talent for more future roles, wider role, or more exposure vertically. Are we tapping into that? Are we giving them the development they need and the support they need? Or if we don't, then there's a chance that we might lose these superstars, so we don't want to lose them. And anyone that's coming out with lower rankings, what are we doing from a performance management point of view? Are we supporting these individuals? Are we giving them the training and support that we need? So I'm kind of giving this overview report to HR once the process is finished. So the manager's going to have the conversation with the individual. I'm going to have a conversation with HR and tie everything back together again.
I've got 3 things. 1, shall we do a teaser on the superstar thing? Because I asked you to come to Valletta.
Yes.
For the conference.
Yes.
How do we keep our superstars?
Oh, this is a big
you're
topic.
You're going to teach us everything.
A big topic. And then it's very interesting because we're having a lot of conversations at the moment, particularly with different clients, where it seems like they invest a little bit, they don't go all in, and then this individual moves on to another role. And typically what we're seeing is these people move on for promotional roles.
Yes.
So they're not moving on for a sideward step. So it's almost like, they're a superstar. You've dipped your toe in the water of development. As soon as you dip the toe in, they
fly away.
Somebody else recognized that they were a superstar and stole them. So, not stole them, but, they flew away to another business. So I think it's really important that if we're recognizing superstars, that we have a real focus on, if you want to keep them in your business, then you need to jump all in, because if you don't jump all in, somebody else is going to jump all in. And
they're going to be all out.
Yeah, exactly. Completely all out.
The second thing I thought of was this process accelerates what will happen eventually anyways.
Yes.
I am not a fan of the word word of the world. Accelerate. I think it's, it goes against my nature. I think everyone should just calm down, slow down a little bit. It doesn't help us to be this fast and continuously getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and we lose ourselves in it. But in this, since this is, as I said, it's going to happen anyways. Someone is, if you're constant underperformer, then eventually it will show. So this actually just helps the process
completely. And I think also if you think about it, when we were managers, when we were employed, is sometimes with lower performers, you are giving them the benefit of the doubt, you're investing in them, you sometimes might even think it's something to do with you. I think there's some value from a calibration point of view where your peer group are saying, no, we're noticing exactly the same thing. And then it's almost this clarification of, right, so this isn't just about me, this is about the individual. So we need to do something about the individual because my peer group are also saying it. And the same with overachievers. Sometimes we're superstars. Sometimes we're reluctant to brag about our superstars for whatever reason. But actually, if our colleagues are recognizing they're superstars, then that allows us to have a conversation of saying, right, so we all think this person's a superstar. What are we doing about this? Because we don't want to lose this person. And I think typically in calibration is if you see somebody coming out of superstar year 1 and then the superstar year 2, me as the external is saying, right, what are we doing? Where's the investment here? Because next year, this person's going to be a superstar year 3 as well. But if we don't do something about this, then year 4, they're not going to be on this chart. They're not going to be with this business. So we need to be investing in these people. So you're right, accelerate is probably not the right word. I think it's more about this visibility and this...
bringing up the surface.
Completely, and unified visibility, where it's actually not just me and not just my perception. This is actually a group of peers agreeing on these extremes, as it was, where we need to do something about it. But one of the things, and I think we mentioned in the last podcast, is I'm a big fan of steady eddies. Does their job, does it racing well, no questions asked, all the rest of it. I think this process also allows for those steady eddies to not just come out with a steady eddy ranking, because actually there's some things that need a steady eddy approach. So if they're going for an audit, if a business is going through a major audit or major ISO certification, it needs a steady eddy who's really focused, really, concentrating on the detail and getting stuff done. If it ends up that certification happens, then, we are acknowledging that took all those strengths of that specific individual to get that done. So that is a conversation we have, and they don't just end up in a steady eddy pot. They're actually showing themselves as adding more value to the business.
Stability.
Completely. So I think, is sometimes our interpretations of steady eddies, overachievers, underperformers can also lead us to put people into certain boxes where there's actually, when we're having a conversation, what's the value that this person delivered this particular year? And did they do it with maintaining the right relationships within the business? I think those are fundamental conversations that every business should be having, but as a collective unit rather than just a one-off. So I also like that as well.
Which brings me to my number 3. And this becomes more like a tool to managers during the year. Keep the success log.
Completely.
Because here, the steady eddy was the only person needed.
Yeah.
Superstar,
Yeah.
perhaps. So to keep this as a diary, to also facilitate this group talk, make your own job so much easier. Otherwise, you might actually sit and be very repetitive and come up with things like winging it, which is not really helping anything.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good observation. I think the businesses that we work in is if they go through the process year on year, which I think that we've got one client that's going into their 5th year now. So, as it happens year on year, 5th year. So as it happens year on year, some of the managers get very savvy about the fact that this kind of journal log of success stories is really important, and also highlighting what the development needs are, or when they've had an opportunity to excel in a certain position or work with a colleague and excel in an area that isn't part of their job unit. And I think it's learned behavior, but obviously this is something that if the managers come in from the very beginning and they're already kind of got this preparation, it's so much more empowering in the room, because what I'm doing as an external is I need to hear it in a way that I understand it. So you need to have that information. But if you think about it from an external's point of view, Heidi, shouldn't the manager already have this information? So I think actually, yes, it helps in calibration to be prepared for that conversation. But in essence, all I'm asking you to do is to do what really you should be doing if you're managing people, which is know where their strengths are, know where their development needs are, and know what success they've delivered in the business for that year. The calibration just brings it all to the forefront and allows us to have that conversation. So you can really celebrate those successes amongst your peers. And also sometimes we might not see somebody's success because two people in two different departments might have worked on something, and the person who's got the bigger personality is the one saying they delivered all the results, and when we get in the room it's actually, yeah, they delivered some stuff, but it's the quiet person in the background that did all the work to get it done. And this calibration allows us to have that conversation. But the preparation is key, but I'm only asking them to prepare stuff that they should really already know.
So from the boring word calibration,
Yes,
onto a process that is quite long and takes a lot of energy and thought process. So all of the, and you're talking about people.
yes,
So it's a little bit sort of, the ethical part of things. Whereas now I'm seeing it entirely from a different point of view. I remember I said the word backup, like it's actually a really good thing for the managers. You're being backed up with other words, other reasoning about people in your within your own team and also the other ones. You got to say your things. And for an employee, you know, it's a very fair process because it's not only your manager, it's all the managers that, work on what they see. And obviously the consequences of having this as a transparent process within the company makes all the rings of the water sort of, you have to behave. You can't just be a suck up to your own manager. It also goes all around.
Yep, very much so.
Knowing that, I always want, now people are going to go, oh, we're going to contact Luke. Are you doing this all by yourself? Or
Currently, yes. The clients that we've got that do calibration, I do it. I'm not sure why I do it. I think it might be because I really like it. It's because I've had so much exposure of it when I was employed. So I've had to go through it. eBay had, I use a five chart mechanism for my calibration. eBay used a 9. So I've been used to it, and it's very like OCD kind of state, advanced, for want of a better word. So I think my background in regards to using it on the other side is really helpful. But I think I currently I do it alone because I probably enjoy that part. I find it quite interesting.
Yeah, it's your favorite.
Yeah, it's one.
But there must be. You have to say for this not to be, gold and beautiful forests. Something must have happened that went, not where it should go.
Yes. I think there's times when you can see, I think this is the early stages. This doesn't happen now. This has happened when a client's starting off the process. And I think when you start off the process, you're going from, I rate my team, to other people are helping me rate my team. And sometimes in the room I've seen, I remember one occasion where you could literally feel the tension between two specific individuals about one direct report who had worked on cross-functional work. So obviously dotted line into one, permanent line into the other from a reporting line. And they had very different viewpoints about this person's performance. And it tended to get, it did get a little bit tense in the room to the point where I was almost like,
what happened?
What happens? How do I cope with this? Yeah. But it was just more about me bringing bringing the center of attention back to me, just to dissolve the conversation, and then coming back to each individual. And I think actually at that moment I brought the attention back to me to control the conversation, and then went to somebody completely different to get some third party information. But yes, it got very tense between two specific individuals. People who are very outspoken already, have a bit more personality about them, disagreeing about somebody. That was quite an interesting situation, yes.
I can see in your face that you're kind of back there now. If we flip the coin.
Yes.
Success stories. Do you have something really fantastic to share?
My success stories are about the superstars. I really like having a conversation about the superstars and how they were a superstar that particular year and what we're going to do with people. I love it when we start talking about training and development needs for people to expand their job rather than just grow into their job. I think that's a really powerful conversation to be having in a room full of managers or leaders. I love those conversations, and I specifically love the success stories where you can see somebody staying in superstar year after year, but their remit is growing. So we're investing in this person. Between each calibration session, they've been developed, they've been exposed to more stuff, and they're still in superstar, even though we've widened it. And it's almost like, how far can we push this person? But in a good way, not burning them out, but how far can we push this person? And even to the point where, after the second year, they're getting a promotion, their role's completely changing, and then, they're developing into their role again. So those
next year they sit in the room with you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's it. Yeah. And they're part of the calibration process themselves. So I really find those are the success stories where we're having a proper conversation, which we should be as a business, about the superstars within our business, without ignoring the people who are still adding value. So the people that are still adding value to the business, they are still getting their lion's share of the conversation, but we're able to have a really juicy conversation with the superstars about where are we putting the emphasis next year. Well, what does this person need to expose on? So
I like this process. It's fair, and it's like you contribute to the world in your way, like that. So everyone gets seen.
Yeah, very much. I think that's it. Is no matter whether you're the manager or the person being sort of talked about, you're not alone. So it's like
exactly,
and that's I think in the normal process or the traditional process where it's the manager one-on-one, you and the manager, you're alone representing your side, the manager's alone representing their side, and it is both of you are feeling alone, especially if there's some disparity in what you guys are thinking about this person's performance. Whereas I think in this process is the individual's not alone because they've got the other managers giving a full view of them, not just their own manager, and the manager's not alone because when they come out the room, whether it's good or constructive feedback, they've got their colleagues behind them in regards to this is the feedback that you're giving, this is the positive stuff, this is the areas of improvement. It's not just your thought process, it's all of our thought process. So it means they're not alone in that either. So I think it's very empowering for both the individual and the manager from that point where nobody's alone in this process anymore.
You know what? I have no more questions.
That's good.
And I'm like, should I? Should I? Have I missed anything?
I don't think so. I think we've covered. I think for me, the key takeaway from the MadeYou process is that we put so much work in before we get in the room. And I think that is fundamental. If you're going into that room unprepared, I think that's when the conversation would just get out of control because everything's a surprise then. When I go into that room, I'm fully prepared. I know everything about the 360, the self-assessment, the manager, the peer manager. I'm fully informed. Every person has their own sheet. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, who I'm going to bring into the conversation, and it just makes it.
You meet them where they are.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And then it allows me to have that conversation much more effectively. And I love having the people's pictures because I think we're talking about individuals. Let's see what they look like. Put a face to the name. These are not anonymous people. These are our direct reports. Let's see them. Let's talk about them. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. I wish I was part of this in some way, or like a fly on the wall to see this happening.
Yes.
So I'll see you again in like 2 years, or well, first in Valletta.
First in Valletta in June, which is now I'm going to talk about something cool. So that's good. Superstars.
Yeah. We got you for 2 hours.
Yes.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Fun, engaging, lots of activities. Yeah.
Start off the day like that.
Brilliant.
Luke, thank you for coming.
It was a pleasure.
It made me coming here, which I absolutely love.
Fabulous room.
Yes, exactly. So now we branded this room with us as well.
Yes. We've been.
Should we do your last cheers?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.